So the fifth
Hi, everybody.
speaker, hi. So the fifth speaker for today's conference is Dr. Alex Zhavoronkov. Zhavoronkov. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
That's close enough.
Okay. So we'll do with that. From Hong Kong, who is going to speak about building a collaborative longevity biotechnology economy. So a little bit about Dr. Alex. He did his MS in biotech from Johns Hopkins University and a PhD from Lomonosov Moscow State University. Please correct me if I'm wrong. He's the CEO of In Silico Medicine, a venture-backed deep learning company focused on drug discovery and biomarker development for age-related diseases, located at Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, with over 100 bioinformatics and deep learning experts in 6 countries with 4 physical R&D sites. The company built a sustainable revenue generating model providing libraries of highly promising preclinical leads to the pharmaceutical and biotechnological companies and collaborating with hundreds of research groups. Their main expertise is in the application of generative adversary networks and reinforcement learning techniques for generating novel molecular structures and identifying promising targets for a variety of diseases. The main disease areas are oncology, fibrosis, dermatology, and senescence. So on to Dr. Alex. Please kindly present your slides, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for such a kind introduction. A little bit about my background. So about 17 years ago, I switched from IT to biotechnology to focus on aging and longevity, and I hope that more people in IT would follow this path. So we are seeing massive conversion right now of people from semiconductor industry and telecom and web and mobile into longevity, and I hope this trend accelerates. So personally, I am deeply interested in longevity biotechnology, and we're trying to build the economy around the various technologies that are proven to work and that do have a sustainable business model. And we're trying to link all of them together. So one of the purposes, one of the reasons I agreed to speak at this event is that we're of course looking for interns and we're looking for people to hire. So if you are, if you think that you are qualified enough and you are interested in longevity and drug discovery, send me an email. And here is my WeChat as well. If you are to interview with a company, make sure that you know biological pathways, because we'll be asking you to draw many different pathways. And if you are not ready, then just don't apply. So I'm the founder and CEO of 2 companies. One is called In Silico Medicine. So it's focused on end-to-end drug discovery. I'll briefly talk about that just to give you a gist of what we do there. And I'm the founder and CEO, well, now Chief Longevity Officer of Deep Longevity. That company is focusing on application of deep biomarkers for aging and longevity. So I'm calling from the Hong Kong Science Park. So this beautiful building is right to the right of me. So calling right away from our office. And a little bit of a disclaimer. Deep Longevity has recently been acquired by a Hong Kong company called Region Pacific. They're publicly traded, so none of the following is an investment advice, no forward-looking statements, etc. And the technology that we are focusing on and we're deeply passionate about, that's driving pretty much everything at In Silico and at Deep Longevity, is called deep generative reinforcement learning. So you probably know about deep reinforcement learning from DeepMind's experiments and DeepMind's feats in defeating the Go champion. So it allows you to learn strategy, and generative adversarial learning allows you to generate new synthetic data with specific properties, with specific generation conditions. So we combine those 2 technologies to invent new stuff pretty much everywhere with specific objective and with specific generation conditions. We've used it for biological age prediction and monitoring, biomarker development, small molecule screening, molecular generation, and also even mental health and depression, motivation, behavioral modification as well. So at Ensilica, we use it primarily for biomarker discovery and target discovery, molecular generation, and clinical trials analysis. At Deep Longevity, we use it for bioage prediction and monitoring, also for synthesizing synthetic data with specific age in mind, biomarker discovery, and the real-world data analytics. So one of the best lectures I've seen to date on AI for longevity, giving you kind of a broad gist of where things are going, and also introducing some methods, explaining the difference between deep and shallow learning, is a lecture by Dr. Li Kai-Fu. So if you go to agingpharma.org and find the lectures, there are now, many of them are on YouTube already. You can just listen to this lecture for 28 minutes to get kind of the different views on different machine learning techniques. By the way, that was the largest conference on aging to date. More than 2.6 thousand people participated, 4 days. And one of the technologies that I've kind of mentioned, generative adversarial learning, is very well represented by this paper, generative adversarial text-to-image synthesis. So it's not the original paper that described the GANs, but it's a very good application paper by Reed, ICML 2016. It shows you that you can have a generator network which learns to generate meaningful noise in response to certain generation conditions, in this case text, and the discriminator which learns to detect the output of the generator, evaluate it against the ground truth, and see if the output is true or false. So together those networks train to produce something like this. So you can see that if you have textual input, so this small bird has a pink breast and crown and black primaries and secondaries, you can see generated images that have that sense of direction that you want them to have. They are not Google search, this is generated. And as 2016, that's why you have such low quality. Nowadays, it's by far superior. In 2017, you've got AI generating fake faces that are indetectable from, pretty much indistinguishable from ground truth, from real people. Those people do not exist. And this is also what we do for generation of synthetic data from very large data sets to make data sets anonymized. So you basically train on site on some hospital data set that you don't want to touch yourself. So you give specific software for other people to produce the synthetic data, and they create billions of different biological profiles or medical profiles from the data they have internally. So it's completely anonymized. Those people do not exist, but they contain a lot of features that you want for consorted biomedical research. And you can see that AI, predictive AI, can really nicely predict the age of those people. So we can very quickly visually confirm this. We work with mostly data types where you cannot use a human to validate. So you need to do experimental validation. And if you look at the history of deep learning, the major concepts date back to 1940s. But the GANs came out only in 2014 out of the work of Ian Goodfellow, at that time at the University of Montreal with Yosha Benjo, and then he moved to Google. So we caught him approximately around 2015 and started this work. And we started doing work primarily in molecular generation, so generating small molecules with specific properties. And the first paper, peer-reviewed paper, that came out describing the concepts of the applications of GAN to small molecule generation with some experimental validation, with some virtual experimental validation. It came out in 2016. But later we moved this field forward, synthesized the molecules, tested, and that's what in silico medicine is doing. So this is a very important slide for all of you who are not familiar with pharmaceutical industry. This is the slide to learn by heart or read the paper in the original paper in Nature Reviews Drug Discovery by Steve Paul at the time at Eli Lilly, how to improve R&D productivity. And it shows you the different steps of the pharmaceutical R&D, stemming from target discovery, where you identify the biological mechanism of disease, and hopefully you can narrow it down to a few or one protein target. Then you discover a molecule or an antibody for that target, that's target to hit. And here you can see the cycle time, right? So how long it takes you. So one year to identify a hit to lead optimization, 1.5 years. And then you can see, 2, 1, 1.5 years going forward. So the first 5 years usually spent in discovery, and then another 6, 7 years you spend in development where you're testing in humans, phase 1 safety, phase 2 efficacy, phase 3 both safety and efficacy combined. So this process takes a lot of time and usually has just under 10% success rate from where you started. So that's the most inefficient industry out there. What we are trying to do is we're trying to improve this industry with AI by developing an end-to-end pipeline that caters to pretty much everything. We have many proofs of concept. So one we published last year around the same time, but did the experiments in 2018. Mid-2018, using the technology that we developed in 2017. So here, a biological target was presented to us implicating fibrosis, DDR1. That's not the one that we're taking to the clinic. We used our generative tensorial reinforcement learning system for very rapid generation of novel molecules. We synthesized them, tested them in vitro, and then did also in vivo testing, published on Nature Biotech. It became a very popular paper, even though we have many others. All that was done under 2 months. So pharmaceutical industry was quite impressed, and now we have many contracts with top pharmaceutical companies. And internally, we have, I'm just not going to talk about all of that, but internally we use this to identify a novel target. So again, we generated a lot of synthetic biological data with specific properties. Some of those properties were expression levels of individual proteins in fibrosis, multiple fibrotic diseases. Generated some molecules for the targets that we deemed to be promising, tested in a big pharma assay in fibrosis. It worked. We've made better molecules, tested in vitro, tested in vivo. Now we're taking those small molecules into clinic. So that's why the company is quite valuable, because nobody has demonstrated this feat yet. And because we started focusing on development, now we are open source, not open sourcing, but opening our platform to the others. So Pandomics system you can already apply and start using starting today, but better apply next week because currently our team is overloaded with the number of requests. So this system allows you to use the data in the system, or you can upload your own data to identify promising targets in a variety of diseases, including aging. So if you want to look at senolysis, it allows you to do that. If you want to look at NAD metabolism, it can do that. If you want to look at all kinds of TOR inhibition hypothesis, you can do that as well. And Chemistry 42, it's not available for general public. It's only available for big pharmaceutical companies to deploy because it's very expensive and difficult deployment into their own internal infrastructure. It allows you to generate novel chemistry. And in Clinico, it predicts the outcomes of clinical trials. So we basically create kind of the integrated approach at Insilico to disrupt, digitize, and democratize pharma. But of course, at Insilico, many of us are very, very interested in humanity's biggest problem. And humanity's biggest problem that we tend to ignore, that we evolved to ignore. So there is also psychological aging, and there is evolutionary psychology of aging that I can give you some gist of what is happening with us and why we pack this knowledge of continuous decline and decay leading to death. We pack it deep into our subconscious and distract ourselves from that understanding using current events. So we are much more sensitive and interested in more current events rather than the big picture that all of us collaboratively need to solve. So aging, I think, is more important than environmental issues or any kind of other social political issues for many reasons. And that's why we're also focusing on deep aging clocks, and that's where we launched Deep Longevity. So there are multiple ways to build aging clocks, and the first one built by Steve Horvath and Hanem. They were built using shallow models where you have kind of really primitive machine learning techniques looking for patterns in data with just one input layer predicting the age. Deep models allow you to have many neurons on input and many layers of neurons to predict age. So you have one neuron on the output. As those networks get exposed to data, a lot of data, they learn very complex patterns, and you can actually do a lot with them to make them interpretable and valuable for target discovery and understanding of the various biological processes. So they are not just stupid black boxes that predict age. And we were, I think, the first group to realize that age is a universal feature present in pretty much every data set. So if you want to predict something, start with age because it's usually there. Everybody has age. Every living being has age. You can have many neurons on the input with one neuron on the output. And you can train on large longitudinal data sets that are available and train on multiple previously incompatible data types to predict age. And then you can play around with those deep neural nets to identify pathways, targets, causal graphs, generate synthetic data. That's why I'm saying that, know your pathways first. So, if you haven't learned pathways, take Lodish's Advanced Cell Biology or some other good book and just memorize it by heart. Even though, of course, there are lots of disconnects there, but it's a good starting point. So you would be able to validate some of those outputs using human intelligence. And we also came out with a really cool concept where we train on age and then retrain on disease. So you have two neurons on output. You have age and disease status. And that allows you to see what kind of features are more important for aging rather than disease and vice versa. So that helps you identify novel targets. And there are multiple deep aging clocks published over the years. So one of the first one was our own blood test clock using very simple blood tests. I hope I can show you some slides. I know I'm going to be over time a little bit. This clock is approximately 5 to 6 years accurate. We also patented the first tissue-specific transcriptomic clock. We published it as a patent, not as a paper, 2017. We published the microbiomic aging clock. There is also X-ray clocks, there is MRI clocks, there are facial images, physical activity-based clocks, and all of them measure different things, and they also have different error rates. So sometimes you don't want this clock to be very accurate, you want it to be responsive to a specific intervention, and you want it to be consistent in a single person, but not in a population. And we're trying to integrate all of those clocks into an ecosystem, so many clocks are combined together with different weighted averages to get a more comprehensive person of the human being, because you technically are your age. So when you are doing, mind uploading from the previous lecture, which I support this kind of research, but I think it's a little bit too early to get mind uploading as a very credible discipline yet. You would need to upload yourself so that your consciousness is preserved, and you need to ensure that your age is right as well. I wouldn't be able to make friends with myself, 20 years ago. And many of those clocks are science-backed. So these are just some of our papers. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. So, and I'm gonna skip that. So just, look at this paper, Deep Biomarkers of Human Aging, where we, for the first time, used deep neural nets on very simple blood tests to predict age. And we did permutation feature importance to understand how much does each individual feature contribute to the accuracy of the predictor. For the first time, anecdotally, we saw that people who look older than the chronological age to the deep neural net on blood tests, they have some kind of disease, some kind of comorbidity, and people who look younger, they're actually quite fit. And yeah, that's where we used the ensemble of 21 deep neural nets, 2016, ensembled them into a stacking model, and got about 5.5 years accuracy. Now we are much more accurate, and we can handle diverse cases, many populations. And we showed that those aging clocks are also very sensitive to, for example, smoking status. We can predict mortality. We can predict hazard ratio of individual patients who, in pretty much every population, if you look 5 years or older to the deep neural net, than your chronological age, the hazard ratio goes up substantially, 2 to 3x. Microbiomic aging clock, again, I didn't pay too much attention to this data before I realized that it's very predictive of age. And now you can also use all kinds of techniques, like, for example, SHAP or deep feature selection, to identify which bacteria are more kind of make you look older or younger at the gut level. So we call them senonegative, senopositive, and you can modulate some of those bacteria with antibiotics or with probiotics. So that's a really cool thing. It doesn't necessarily will kind of make you younger, but it may make you look younger to the deep neural net. Now we're talking about how do we commercialize that and how we build an economy around this. So we started a company called Deep Longevity, which is kind of clock agnostic. So we are developing many clocks. We're testing those many clocks, but most importantly, we're integrating those clocks into one single platform. We call it Age Metric. And we have many clocks integrated already. So microbiome, blood, heart, methylation age, photo age, transcriptomic age, behavior age. So even if you start with nothing, just with a tabula rasa cell phone, you input some of your basic data, like how old do you feel, and we start collecting this data over time and building an age profile of you. So the more data is available, the more we can talk about in terms of the various interventions and the various trajectories for health. And we have a web version, by the way. So right now you can go and register already. So Young AI web, and start playing around with the system. Hopefully next week or the week after, we're going to have an app. It's going through very rigorous testing right now by many professionals. We're still trying to eliminate some bugs and ensure that we put as many peer-reviewed reference papers in there. So it allows you to track your age over time on many levels, starting again from nothing. And you can track some of the interventions like that. And what we are doing, again, to kind of bring the community together, we're building a longevity cloud, which can provide some of those clocks via an API. So if you're doing a clinical trial, or if you are doing a meta-clinical trial, or if you have a longevity clinic, which is more interesting even, you will be able to send some of the anonymized data into the cloud, and will return the clock, and you can start tracking. We also provide customized reports to clinics. So we work with multiple clinics that utilize those reports. And with reinforcement learning, we can, and generative reinforcement learning, we can also project the health profile and age profile of the person into the future, and see what features do we need to change in order to prevent the various pathologies, or even prevent aging on some data types. Again, those are highly hypothetical, but many of those recommendations that are stemming from those projections are very primitive. So, like, for example, take an iron supplement, or decrease cholesterol, or decrease glucose. And some of them are easily modified using behavioral interventions. So some may lead to age reversal. Again, we cannot make any claims right now, but this is the system that tracks your age and also makes very basic recommendations on how to look younger. And for clinics, we provide age metric reports that track many different ages. I'll skip a few slides. So now, talking about the integrated longevity network. So what we are trying to do, and one of the reasons why we sold this company to a publicly traded entity, is because many of the investors in this publicly traded entity are clinics that are using those clocks. So they realize that if they're investing in this public company, they can benefit twofold. So by introducing something new, but also by the more they use those clocks, the better for their investment, and it appreciates the entire economy. And as this system starts being used by the insurance companies, we're going to see the entire economy appreciating even further. So here is how it looks from the client's perspective who comes to a longevity clinic. So you first upload the clinical data in Young AI. You can be aided by the partnered lab or by a clinic. The Young AI is curated by Deep Longevity. Young AI platform produces reports. They can be revised and reviewed by the various doctors in the clinic that you're collaborating with. The doctors can provide medical advice. The app cannot. And physicians can become part of the longevity network to share their experiences of what worked and what didn't work. Through Deep Longevity, through partnered labs, through longevity clinics, such as Human Longevity in San Diego. So they have a system called Health Nucleus. We partnered with them, and they are one of the first investors in the company. And there is a physician network, and you can learn more about, things like that at longevity conferences that we help organize and support, like Aging Pharma, for example. And very soon we're going to start a longevity course. So for the hospital path, again, longevity network can support your clinic to enable new kinds of tests. We can educate your staff, we can provide training, provide opportunities for global collaborations between physicians, and we can provide a very lucrative, again, investment in a publicly traded company, so that once you start integrating into this system, you would be able to see your business and your investments appreciate at the same time. And Young AI can be used as a tool to analyze new kinds of data from the patients, and also provide recommendations to the doctors and to the patients, and see how you perform over time. So I'll skip a few slides, but we are also looking at insurance applications. So if you're working for an insurance company, or if you want to build one for life insurance, actually life insurance, it's one of the areas where the interests of the subject, of your customer, and the provider are aligned. So you both want the customer to live longer, and the customer probably wants to live longer as well. Maybe they're not as interested in the payout right away. So you can identify the various hazards, the various risks for the client, and provide it as an additional service as an insurance company to ameliorate those risks and maybe even eliminate them. So I'll skip a few slides. I know I'm over time. So here is my WeChat. I use WeChat a lot, and there is my email. We are interested in, again, interns and employees. And again, before you touch the email to send something to us, make sure you know your pathways, regardless of what kind of positions you're applying for. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. That's pretty amazing. A lot of information in a slide, actually. That's pretty amazing. And I kind of understand the model in the sense, the company's model to generate a revenue and how things are working. And like you mentioned here, you are collaborating with Taipei, or it's an office in the Taipei, I'm not sure. I think it's an office in the Taipei, in Taiwan, right? So for the clinical part, where the clinics are collaborating with in silico medicine or your digital longevity, the new company, I'm just curious about, do you follow I believe there must be some certain standard, or you also developing some tools so they let them follow that standard when they provide the input for your platform, right? So is it what kind of, is it their tool as well, or is it something that clinics need to do by themselves?
So we would provide the entire toolkit for tracking the aging clocks. So again, two different stories, two different companies, right? So in silico, it's focused on small molecule design, right, and target discovery for many diseases. And it's currently a very large company with millions in revenue and a very substantial valuation. So we in that company, we work with pharmaceutical companies, we work with healthcare providers, but primarily with the pharmaceutical companies, and we're also doing drug discovery ourselves and collaborating with academics. So the relationship to aging there is that we often pick up projects that are related to very specific aging-associated processes like senolysis or NAD metabolism or rapalogs or antifibrotics. So many different companies collaborate with us through this, and we learn. But Deep Longevity, which is doing young AI, it's a separate company, and there the ecosystem is around the aging clocks, sitting in the longevity cloud. So we standardize those aging clocks for the entire community that is using those clocks, so multiple hospitals, and we also standardize the recommendations. So as those clinics and as those doctors try those recommendations and maybe come up with their own, we see what works and we share it as a protocol with the entire network. So that's the network effect.
And second question is more of sort of machine learning thing. So I see you use the GAN a lot for generating data so that you can train your model more precisely, right? I'm kind of a bit, so I understand, okay, one user came in to your platform, like me, I provide you lots of data like EEG and blood test, maybe also DNA information and all those things, and input goes there. My data might be limited with certain age and certain feature, and then maybe you need generative models to generate more reliant information to predict something more. That's what it is about. Am I saying right?
So GANs would be used here for the purposes of being able to share data. So okay, if you want, let's say, a national government to give you data, you don't actually want to touch patient data in any way, shape, or form ever, unless it is fully anonymized. So you provide them with a tool to anonymize this data while preserving the most biologically relevant features that are related to age and other diseases. But you would not be able to use this data ever to identify a patient. So that's where the GANs come from. But for the basic age predictors, you would use very simple feed-forward deep neural nets, conv nets, etc. For EEG, of course, we do have a project there. And by the way, I published a bunch of, well, I think one paper is reasonably highly cited. By the way, if you want to learn about this field, so Polina Omoshina, she works for me for over 5 years now. And she published a bunch of papers, as you can see, right? So she published more than, what, 40 papers? Yeah. In peer-reviewed journals. So you can see the evolution of our thinking, going from prediction to generation, and how to value different data types. And for me, I used previously very primitive machine learning techniques for so let's see, for EEG, I also did something. Give me a second. Here, PCI.
Oh, yeah.
So this one, brain-computer interface based on generation of visual images, that we actually have a granted patent on that. It's my first paper ever published. And there we used SVM and KNNs and random forest to predict what you are seeing. And also doing some neurofeedback experiments. Again, very old work. Now with GANs, you can actually, if you are looking at the EEG, oh come on, if you are trying to go from, let's say, ActiCap to Epoch or to some more primitive devices, you can also use GANs to predict what the to generate synthetic data in order to predict which sensors to use, and how to better train the model. So GANs give you additional kind of data expansion with additional properties, and some of those properties could be the elimination of some of those sensors that you're lacking in a consumer device, for example. So many applications, again, don't look at the paper, that was a long time ago, but just because those are very primitive algorithms. But GANs can be used in multiple applications for even BCI. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone have any question? Sarah?
I see some questions in the chat box.
Your sound is very little at this moment, Sarah.
Yeah, I see some questions in the chat box. Would you mind like reading?
Okay.
You're breaking up, or not. Let me see. So do you want to read those questions, or do you want me to read them?
Oh, we're trying to read for you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. There's one question from Siddharth. He said he saw you on INK Talks, which is happen in India. And so you are the one of the speaker at something called all.ai conference by INK. So are you going to, I mean, there's any plan to speak any similar kind of conference in India? I mean, you're working a lot of in Asian region, I can see in Taipei, in Hong Kong. So this is also my question in the addition of this. Are you working with any kind of project with India in general?
Yeah, we do have a project where India is involved. That's why also that conference. I think that All AI conference features some of the really top government officials, including the Minister of Education. So we have a really cool project called COVIDomic, which uses multiple data types to stratify the patients by their risk profile, and also predicts the trajectory of the disease and severity of the disease, and possibly, well, might be helpful. Currently, I cannot make this claim because we haven't received complete data yet, but it can also prioritize the different treatments. At that conference, I'm going to be showing the work on COVIDomic. So on the various various techniques that we use to work with data on population scale, also metadata, and yeah. So we're going to be talking about generative biology primarily. That's the project with India. So again, one of the best companies that I know that really has an amazing COVID response team with lots of good engineers and really good biologists and really good data scientists. That's Intel, one of the really top teams that we got to interface with, and together we are developing this COVIDomic initiative, which allows you to use patient metatranscriptome and patient metadata to do patient stratification, survival, disease course analysis, risk factor analysis. So of course, age is a huge feature there, right? So, and biological age is a huge feature. So yeah, attend this conference. I'm going to be showing you what we're doing also with Intel support. And there, Intel India is organizing this conference.
Sounds interesting. We should attend it as well. Have a look at it. And thank you for that information. So yeah, I think anyone else have any questions? So otherwise, we just move to next segment.
Yeah, so basically, you were talking about designing like the clocks which your companies design, the longevity clocks. So, and you were also talking about some app, like a few days later, it's going to be launched. So is it going to, like, can we access that? Is it free, or like we have to, like, is it for commercial purpose? So that's what my question is.
So yes, of course, there will be a free access tool. So to provide basic data tracking capabilities, but if you want to get the full full version, it's going to be we're going to charge $12 a month for the app. So for people who are doing advanced tracking of their biomarkers, that's actually not a lot. That's like 2 cups of latte, right? And with hospitals, we have a very special fee. So if they want to process patients' data and get their clocks and recommendations, we would also charge them, but we would help them promote their services.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you again, Alex. If, I assuming there's no more question, and maybe you're going to get emails because you offer